Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So, in this video I'm going to be showing you 3 different Necrotic grip builds, all for completely different scenarios and different weapon setups. Basically the reason why I'm doing this is because I recently got back into Necrotic grips again, been farming for a very long time to get specific builds, and recently I've actually finally been able to make them. So I'll be covering 3 of my favourites, and let me know what you think. So the first one will be covering a ad clear flash boss DPS build with Thorn and Reeds. Next one being 1-2 punch on Warlock. I know Winter's Guile is really good. It's also really good for 1-2 punch, but there's so much setup, and Warlock melee is so slow that you're honestly better off using 1-2 punch with the extra DOT damage going on in the background. There's also a really nice setup with Witherhoard as well, where you can Witherhoard and then 1-2 punch with Necrotic. Double special, of course. Very nice. And then the last one will be Witherhoard Sword, which is also a completely different build from the 1-2 punch one. So, yeah. That's pretty much it. Okay, so for the first build, I guess I'll cover the subclass first, since that's pretty important. We are going to be using Shadebinder because I'm using Reeds. If you do decide you don't want to use Reeds and you want to use Threaded, or you want to use whatever other linear for this, since I will be focusing around a linear since they are the best DPSing things in the game, or I guess even just 1k if you want to use that. I'm still going to be using particle deconstruction and font of might and stuff with it, so any heavy works, but it is focused on a heavy, and your subclass does have to match that heavy, so keep that in mind. Since I'm using Reeds, I'm going to be using Shadebinder, so I'll go through the fragments and the aspects, and then also another reason why I've chosen Shadebinder for this. So first off, we have Glacial Harvest and we have Bleak Watcher. Perfect synergy with these. You can freeze with Bleak Watcher, which makes Stasis Shards with Glacial Harvest, and then I will be using Elemental Shards with this. They count as Stasis Wells, basically, which is going to give me Font of Might, right? For Reeds. So that's the whole purpose behind these. As for Fragments, we have the gain DR when you're near a frozen enemy or a stasis crystal. We're going to be near a lot of frozen enemies, so this is really good. Then I have Slow from my abilities last longer, which is perfect because that means that Bleak Watcher will keep enemies slowed longer if they somehow get out of its line of sight. So if they get out of its line of sight and can't be frozen, they'll stay slowed for quite a long time, especially in PvE. Next, I have increased the damage and size of the burst of stasis when you destroy a stasis crystal or frozen target. We're going to be killing a lot of frozen targets, so that's really nice. This is optional though, honestly. You could use whatever else you wanted. I just like the extra damage from killing frozen enemies, so I just put it on here. And then we have Stasis Shards Track, which is pretty mandatory with Glacial Harvest, because you can sit pretty far back and rail a boss while getting Stasis Shards tracked to you, which is great. So, that is the Stasis subclass out of the way. Now, for the mods, they are very straightforward, very easy to obtain. You don't really have to build very deep for this. This is a very safe build to use for new players and for people who don't like dumping into Charge of Light and Warmind cells and whatever else. It's very straightforward. Pretty much, we're going to be using Elemental Shards paired with Elemental Time Dilation, double Font of Might, and Particle Deconstruction. Very straightforward. Pretty much, what Elemental Shards does is when we freeze an enemy, we pick up our shard from Glacial Harvest. That will count as a Stasis Well, which will activate Font of Might. Now, because we have Elemental Time Dilation, we can actually stack Font of Might to bring it from 10 seconds to 16 seconds with 2 of these. That can be infinitely refreshed as long as we can actually pick up a shard and have it count as elemental shards. Which is really good for boss DPS, because if you didn't know, Font of Might is a 25% damage increase, which is exactly the same as Focus and Lens. So you can use this as a very easy way to activate pseudo focusing lens for Reed's Regret. Basically out damaging a threaded needle using just focusing lens purely through adept big ones alone. So yeah, very good, very good. And then obviously we have particle deconstruction to aid Reach Regret and make it do incredible damage. Now, my special here, just want to get this out of the way, is completely optional. I was using Cartesian, but there's a really nice interaction with Thorn and Necrotic where if you tag an enemy with Thorn's Burn and then kill that enemy with literally anything else, it'll still activate Necrotic's poison effect. So with GLs being really good for mages, being able to almost one-shot them, if not one-shot them, I figured I'd use my blinding empty vessel just to basically tag an enemy with Thorn. If they're like a major or they have really high health and I don't want to waste heavy, I can just tag them with Thorn, switch to the special, insta-kill them, and that will activate Necrotic and kill the enemies around them. So, the build looks almost complete. Obviously, Thorn and Necrotic will be used for the ad clearing. That's the ad clearing side of things. The mods are the DPS side of things, but as for stats, this is where a bit more help comes into play. Obviously, 100 Discipline helps me get Bleak Watchers. I do highly recommend 100 Discipline because Stasis tanks your cooldowns. So you kind of want high Discipline with Bleak Watcher so you can infinitely freeze a boss or enemies around them to get Elemental Shards very quickly. 100 Intellect is really nice for ad clear with the super. You can also panic super, because Shadebinder, honestly, or Winter's Wrath, is kind of a useless super. So it's really nice to have it there and continuously use it for easy ad clear and to basically stay alive. We also have Recov to make rifts. You could use an Empowering Rift, which will stack with Font of Might, by the way. That does stack. So you can use an Empowering Rift for DPS if you don't have a well user nearby, since it is the same damage increase as a well, and will stack with Font of Might. So you can use that to get those back really fast, right? High recov, and also to stay alive. So that's for the stats. You don't need strength because we have Glacial Harvest. This gives us melee energy, and quite a lot of it. And then the other stats you don't really care about on Warlock and PvE anyway. So that is this build out of the way. I know I spoke about it for a while, but that's just how it is. Even though it's very straightforward, that's the build. So I'll have a little bit of gameplay, just quickly showing it off. I don't want to make this video too long, but it probably will be quite long. But yep, I'll just have a bit of gameplay, showing it off, killing some ads, and then going into the DPS side of things really quickly. And yeah. Alright, so for the actual build, we are using 1-2 punch, of course, so we're going to be focusing a lot on melee. First off, for stats, we want supers, because Well of Radiance, of course, increasing your damage. If you don't have a super for whatever reason, you can use your melee, which obviously you're going to be using, to activate Empowerment, which will stack with Trapped Cannon. Trapped Cannon is a 30% debuff, and Empowerment is a 25% increase, like damage increase. So you're debuffing for 30%, you're increasing your damage by 25%, I think, and that's a ton more damage. So as for mods go, we are again using Elemental Time Dilation. Because I am not using an Arc subclass, I have to use Overcharge Wellmaker, which means when I finish your things, I make 2 Arc Wells. And then when I pick up the well, we have Well of Ions here, where, of course, if you pick up an Arc Well, you get increased melee damage on your next melee. Unfortunately, this is a one-time thing, since when you're actually going in and you're 1-2 punching a boss or you're 1-2 punching mages and stuff, you're probably going to end up meleeing multiple times. So it is only going to work for the first one, but that's still nice. The reason why I'm using Elemental Time Dilation with 2 of these is because it only lasts 10 seconds. Now, it sounds like a lot of time, but when you're doing a bunch of other stuff, or I don't know, there's quite a lot of setup sometimes with this, so I like having a lot of time to think about what I want to do before I use that melee. Maybe the boss encounter you're doing requires you to kill an enemy, or a certain amount of enemies, to actually get the boss's shield to drop. I don't know off the top of my head what encounter that would be, but sometimes stuff like that exists. And you want to finish her, and maybe you accidentally pick up the well too early, and now you're on a 10-second timer, right? But instead of 10 seconds, it's going to be 16 seconds before it runs out for you to actually use that melee. Honestly, this mod is completely optional. You could use anything else here. I kind of like having that extra damage bonus. It is pretty substantial. It's a very big bonus. And I kind of just wanted more time to be able to use it. So, yeah, I don't know. This kind of does seem like a waste now I'm thinking about it, but it works. So, yeah, that's the build. Everything else is obviously focused on shotguns. Don't need to talk about subclass anymore. So, yeah, that's it. That is the build. Alright, so our third and final build is up next. This is going to be the Witherhoard sword build for Necrotic. Of course, we are going to be on Dawnblade, mainly for solo play. You could pretty much use whatever you want, even Stasis. But since, for the gameplay I will be showing, I am solo, I figured I'd use well for this as well, just so if you're solo, you can use it too. So, pretty straightforward. Again, we're going to be using Charge of Light methods. In this case, I'm using Taking Charge, just because it's super easy to make orbs. All 3 of my weapons are masterwork, so it's great. And I can make orbs incredibly easily and get charged. I'm using Charged Up, so we go to Charge of Light 3 rather than 2, because swords aren't amazing for DPS, and you probably will end up using all 3 of those charges, and hopefully whatever you're killing is dead or shielded by that time. So, yep, we have Charge of Light 3. I am using Radiant Light because I want stats. Now, of course, again, we want 100 Strength for the Empowerment melee. I'm using 100 Discipline for just grenade purposes, either health. You know, you're going to be right up in the face of a boss. So, throwing the Healing Nade is super, super nice in that regard. And you can also use it for ad clear and whatever else, right? It doesn't really matter. It's a grenade. Grenades are awesome. And then we have 100 recurve because health. Class, ability, energy. So with that all out of the way, we then have the main piece of the build. Everything we're using this Charge of Light stuff for, and that is Lucent Blade, which is a 35% damage increase. That is the same as Bubble. If you use this with Bubble, it does not work. So, basically, if you have a Bubble on your team, everything I just mentioned is completely worthless. So, keep that in mind. But yeah, you get extra charge rate and you get 35% damage buff. Super awesome. That is the build. It is as simple as that. You just Witherhoard a boss, melee them, so you have double DOT, and then destroy him with the sword. As for swords, I'd recommend using anything, really. I mean, it doesn't really matter, honestly. I was going to recommend an adaptive, but then I realized that vortexes are pretty much exactly the same, so it really doesn't matter. Yeah, adaptives, vortexes on Warlock are identical, so you don't need to worry about which one you want to use. Falling Guillotine hasn't been the best sword in the game for a very long time, so if you're still aggressively using that, you can, but if you want to switch it up and use an adaptive, you also can, because they're just as good. Now you can use this exact build with Lament as well, you just can't use Witherhoard. So you do lose a lot of damage from that. Adaptives and Vortexes with Witherhoard and Necrotic do out damage Lament, keep that in mind. So yeah, but that's the build. I guess I'll show gameplay now, and that'll be it for the video. So thanks for watching, let me know what you think of the builds, and adios.